is have a debate on what we call a miscellaneous provisions bill. It's called the Miscellaneous Amendments No.2 Bill of 2020. Madam Speaker, I've listened to the contributions of those on the other side, and in particular the member for Caroni Central and the member for Couva South. And I'd like to just address a couple of the points that were raised by the previous speakers. The first is all of the fuss, the noise about the number of bills that are sought to be addressed here, lest the population, the public, gather the wrong impression. We need to correct the record. What you're looking at here is only a handful of issues really being addressed. So quite a number of the clauses that go to the amendment of other pieces of legislation are falling into only a handful of categories of issues being addressed. So for example, quite a lot of these clauses deal with the improved efficiency or attempts to improve the efficiency of the judiciary or the criminal justice system in particular. So I heard the member for Caroni Central raise a number of questions, a number of concerns as he saw it, some of which startled me, to be quite frank, and I wondered for a moment whether it was a frontal attack on the judiciary. And I hope that the member for Caroni Central was not suggesting that. But lest that he was, I will address those matters in a short while. So the first thing I'd like to say and put onto the record, lest there be any confusion caused, is this is a simple bill that is addressing a number of other acts to make amendments, but really to achieve a small category of changes. And the first category would be a more efficient judicial system. So Clause 4, for example, Madam Speaker, of this bill, which is really amending the Summary Courts Act and other provisions, is really carrying out a transformation of the judicial system, the criminal justice system in particular. Over the past few years, the judiciary has requested of the Cabinet that we permit them to make a number of changes, and these changes are now being enacted via legislation. As a person who practiced in the courts for many years, and as Madam Speaker would recall, there is a need for greater efficiency in the judicial system, and in particular on the criminal side. And we hope that with the passage of this legislation on the back end, because there's been previous legislation, we as the public, as the member for Caroni Central rightly said, at the end of the day, the judicial system is to service the public. And these amendments are not being made for the efficiency of the lawyers or the efficiency of or the benefit of the lawyers, the benefit of the practitioners, the benefit of the judiciary, and it really is being made, these changes are being made to make it a more efficient judicial system, and the end result for that, the beneficiary of that, will be the public of Trinidad and Tobago. So I heard the member for Caroni Central ask questions. Is this putting increased power in the hand of the Chief Justice? Is a simple amendment being made that the Chief Justice, no longer the Chief Magistrate, can make certain appointments. So all of this furor and this attempt to create this cloud that all of a sudden you're empowering a Chief Justice, and just to remind the population, at the end of the day, constitutionally, the Chief Justice is the person who's administratively in charge of the judiciary. So I could not understand the point or the attempt at a creation of confusion by the member for Caroni Central. There are no additional powers being given to the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice is responsible for the judiciary. He is administratively responsible. Another one of the changes being made here today, which was a policy decision accepted by the Cabinet, is to get rid of all of the magisterial districts. I remember coming back here in 1997 as a young practitioner, going to Hugh Wooding Law School, and now one of the courses you had to do was criminal procedure, and looking at how complicated the criminal procedure was made. Something as simple as anybody who got a speeding ticket, you had to go and pay that speeding ticket now in the magisterial district. So if you went on an excursion to the other side of Trinidad, managed to commit an infraction and get a speeding ticket or a parking ticket, and then on a weekend, and you couldn't pay it, because you had to pay it at the magisterial district court. You couldn't pay it, say, in Mayaru. You came back to Port of Spain. You now have a 14-day period within which to find yourself back in Mayaru to go and pay that ticket. What you're seeing here today is long overdue. So the cabinet took a decision, forget about all of these magisterial districts. We will have North, we will have South, and we'll have Tobago. And that leads to a greater efficiency. So I could not understand the point being made about centralization and all of the horrors of centralization and the potential leading to abuse of power and throwing in words like corruption. I thought to myself, how ironic a conversation about corruption. And I'll leave that right there for now. So I would like to state from this side, we support the requests that were made by the judiciary to create a more efficient system. We as an administration support this because we see the beneficiary at the end of the day being the public of Trinidad and Tobago. And that could only be a good thing. As a person who practiced, as a person who remembered in particular the inefficiencies, unfortunately, of the overload on the magisterial system, what I'd like to tell the public is these changes are being made, these amendments are being made, even though they might be numerically a lot in terms of the number of pieces of legislation being amended. At the end of the day, it is for one purpose, to get a more efficient criminal justice system. So it is a positive thing. And we reject any frontal attack on the judiciary. The question was being asked, why is justice always delayed and denied? You know, we made some reform with respect to traffic. So the answer to that, member for Caroni Central, is what you're looking to do here today is to make a more efficient criminal justice system. It's not the additional empowerment of a Chief Justice. At the end of the day, it makes sense. It makes logistic sense, it makes managerial sense, because ultimately the buck stops with the Chief Justice on the civil and the criminal side for the administration of justice. So what we're doing here, Madam Speaker, in my humble opinion, is finally moving out of an archaic system, in particular on the magisterial district side. They're changing the names of certain clerks, etc., giving them new names, making the necessary amendments to the law. Another issue I heard the member for Caroni Central spend some time on, again, unfortunately, in my humble opinion, with a lot of furor and a lot of, why aren't the reports here? And this is the amendment with respect to granting the Election and Boundaries Commission the permission, the authority to lay a report in 2021. And again, just in case the public are being misled, I just want to put on the record, this is a request that came from the EBC. It has absolutely nothing to do with the government. At the end of the day, the government is simply the conduit. So the EBC wrote to the government, and it is as a result of COVID. Lest we forget in this country, due to the good management of COVID, so they're not, fortunately, a number of corpses lining up, an unusual number of persons testing positive for COVID, the country went into a shutdown period. We went into a stay-at-home period at a very critical stage. It started at the beginning of March, and it's only 2 weeks ago we came out of it. The EBC, under the legislation, had to lay these reports in Parliament in June. June has gone. So even the point that the member for Caroni Central was making, will come on late in the next 2 weeks, etc., it's non-applicable. When we looked at the law, when we received the request as a cabinet, we looked at the law, we sought advice. The advice is you have to amend the act. So we've taken the precaution and given them the opportunity. There is absolutely nothing untoward. So again, I guess it is because of the season that we're in, and there's a belief that the elections will be very soon. Persons are getting jittery. There is no single serious political party in Trinidad and Tobago that does not already have all of the statistics of the local government election, the THA election, the last general election, whatever the elections are. There is no serious candidate, and maybe this is something to put a marker on. There's no MP or serious prospective candidate who does not already know their polling divisions and how many votes were cast in what polling division. Well, what I can say, because I certainly will never want to speak for the other side, but on this side, and a P&M party. That is how we conduct our business. We all take our responsibility. So again, a complete attempt to create a cloud where there is none. Minister Dillon, and it was quite fitting, Minister Dillon being a Major General retired and former Chief of Defense Staff, touched on the Clause 14, which are the amendments being made to the Defense Act. I'll respond to that in a short while. I'd just like to also point out Clause 12, which seeks to amend the Indictable Offences Preliminary Inquiry Act and to provide for the trial of an accused is heard at prison. The Attorney General touched on this. Again, this is one of the benefits, because respectfully, it's my personal opinion that there are lessons to be learned out of COVID. And one of the lessons that we, not only us here in Trinidad, but we as citizens of the globe should be learning is to be more efficient. The use of virtual meetings, the use of technology to spend our time more efficiently and more safely. I am happy to see, as the Minister of National Security, but as a citizen, that one of the benefits that was gathered from COVID is that the courts had a virtual system. So now the prisoners are able to go to virtual court set up in the prison. It's more safe, it's more secure, and they're able to conduct the trials, the magisterial hearings virtually. So you have the lawyers, you have the judges, you have the prisoners, all in a more secure setting, conducting these, and that's what Clause 12 is about. So this is one of the benefits of COVID, these virtual hearings and meetings. Of course, there's less prisoner transport taking place. So again, that is a benefit from a security point of view, and I commend it as the Minister of National Security. Clause 13, amending the Community Service Orders Act to provide for references to court locations and not magisterial districts. This is a further amendment to what I was speaking a short while ago about, Madam Speaker, and now that we are going to have court locations, so you're not pinned. The judiciary is not pinned. So rather than it being restrictive, it is actually giving the judiciary much more leeway now to conduct their business administratively, efficiently, and hopefully to redound to the benefit of the public of Trinidad and Tobago. The member for Couva South, I get now to Clause 14. The member for Couva South was asking certain questions. The first, when I came in, I heard him saying that he's hoping that we would communicate to all persons in Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force about these new provisions. First of all, I'd like to say that everything in Clause 14 was requested by the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force. We listened to the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force, and we're happy to finally make these amendments, which have been touched on by previous speakers. We are now formalizing the Air Guard. The Air Guard has been in existence. Unfortunately, within recent times, the assets of the Air Guard unit were reduced, but we're looking at getting more assets back into the Air Guard as our circumstances get a little better. So you're seeing, first of all, the Air Guard is being formalized as a unit. Minister Dillon went into the history, and we thank him for that. And then also, what we're allowing for the first time, and this is very important administratively, is we're seeing that when members of the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force unfortunately find themselves on the wrong side of the law, we're giving the Chief of Defence Staff the ability to suspend, and the relevant commanding officers, the ability to suspend with due process these personnel. This power and this provision exists for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, where the Commissioner of Police can suspend and send on leave officers, police officers who have found themselves on the wrong side of the law. We're saying the same thing here. So now going forward, it was a lacuna before and long overdue, and I'm thankful that we're able to get this done now. If there's any Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force personnel who is the subject of a criminal charge, it now allows the Defence Force the ability to put that person on suspension and get them out of active duty. That has to be a positive for Trinidad and Tobago. The member for Couva South asked questions, and that will be properly told to, of course, all of the membership of the Defence Force. I am certain that the Chief of Defence Staff and the various commanding officers would make it very known to the personnel in the Defence Force now. And we have, unfortunately, a few occasions of bad apples. You have persons who unfortunately have found themselves in criminal activity in the Defense Force, and now this is an important power to give us the ability to send them on administrative leave, to suspend them, etc., whilst their criminal matters are being heard. The Vice Chief of Defense Staff. The Vice Chief of Defense Staff position has existed for some time. In fact, our member for Dabadi O'Meara, I'm told, was one of the first who held the position of Vice Chief of Defense Staff. We've also had Sandy and Phillips in that position. What the Defense Force have asked now is let us formalize the position. To answer the question, what is the role? The Vice Chief of Defense Staff is really to assist the Chief of Defense Staff from an administrative point of view, to help him or her, whoever's the CDS at the time. The Vice Chief of Defense Staff will ease up the Chief of Defense Staff by taking away some of the administrative duties, by assisting really wherever the Chief of Defense Staff so requires. It is not something that is unusual, and it is something that we are happy to finally formalize, and that is a role that that person will play. Of course, when the Chief of Defense Staff goes on leave or the Chief of Defense Staff is out of the country, it would be expected that the Vice Chief of Defense Staff would be the person who then carries that responsibility. Right now, as it is, a recommendation is made to the Minister of National Security, who would approve it. I heard a suggestion about political interference in appointments. I'd just like to put on record that it has always been above a certain rank when recommendations are made for promotions of commissioned officers. It would be the Minister of National Security, consultation with the Prime Minister, that would go or not go with these recommendations. And I smiled when I heard it, because I was reminded that there was a former CDS whose leave was actually bought out under the former administration. Not only the leave being bought out, but an extension via contract being granted. That's something unheard of. So it was a little bit hypocritical to sit here and listen that the amendments we are making, which are at the request of the Defense Force, are going to certainly allow a ballooning of political interference. There has been absolutely no political interference, no accusation with any merit, or no accusation at all in this last 5-year term of there being any political interference in the runnings of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, because there has been none. But I was reminded that in that period between 2010 and 2015, not only was there political interference, there was political cherry picking, and not only the purchase and buyout of leave, but also an extension via contract to extend a certain Chief of Defense Staff in position, which led to a disadvantage for the officers who rightly should have been allowed the promotion upwards. So that hypocritical suggestion should be rejected outright. The next clause I'd like to go to is clause 15, which is amending the Firearms Act. As every FUL holder will know, under the firearms legislation, you have a specific date by which to pay for your FUL license. Again, because of COVID, persons were found to be out of time, and whilst the Commissioner of Police wrote to me as the Minister of National Security asking that we allow persons until the end of June, and then now until, I think I've suggested, the 31st of August, it has to be done via legislation. And there are a number of other amendments like that in here, where legislatively you would be out of time, and all we're doing is empowering under legislation via amendment for those extensions to be granted. So that includes FUL firearm license holders. The only other clause, Madam Speaker, that I'd like to detain us with any further is clause 28, which is amending the Customs Act to include the definition of pleasure craft. As an administration, one of the things we've been looking at to really promote the maritime industry, which is a potential diversification industry for Trinidad and Tobago, is simplifying all of the relevant forms. So one of the decisions we took as a policy decision as a cabinet is to have the immigration, customs, and I think it's the maritime division at the Ministry of Works and Transport, have them all converge into one form. The requirements that you have separate forms, so it's going to be one form now, and this is the amendment that needs to be made to permit that for a more efficient service, and it's an area that we plan to promote, because geographically Trinidad and Tobago is right outside of the hurricane belt, and there's great potential in that industry. So we've heard them on that, and that is what we intend to do. Madam Speaker, it's a very short contribution, and in conclusion, I'd like to thank the constituency of Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West for allowing me the opportunity to continue to contribute on their behalves. Thank
Member
you.
for Cover North.